April was a month of remembering several big weather events in our area. My name is Holly Knupp, minister to median adults, and that word remember, in fact, kept coming up over and over since January. Then when I realized that this is Memorial Day weekend, I knew it wasn't a coincidence that God has been speaking that word remember to me in different ways. Sometimes God speaks with a question mark. Remember when I provided for you? I will do that again. Remember when you thought you couldn't speak in front of your classmates, but I filled you with my peace? I will do that again. Remember when a TV fell on your son's head when he was 2 years old and I protected him? I will protect him still. Sometimes God speaks with an exclamation point, getting my attention, like a parent shouting, remember! Stop before you hurt yourself or someone else. Don't forget what I've done for you. Why are you so afraid? Remember, I am with you always. Sometimes, though, it is God giving me a subtle hint to remember, period. We are so busy being pushed by the storms of life that we don't take the time to remember where we have been and how far we have come, and that God has been with us all along. I've recently started making a list of promises as He reveals them so I can go back and remember, such as eternal life in heaven, a plan for my good, to take care of me through trials, to never leave me, to fight for me, to cleanse me, to forgive me when I seek it. These are promises He gives to all of us, not just me. "40 years ago, April 21st, in my hometown of Water Valley, Mississippi, I personally remember a typical Saturday before Easter. My dad was at work at the pharmacy downtown. My younger brother, along with my 3 cousins, were under my mother's feet as she prepared Easter dishes that would be taken to my aunt and uncle's house, who lived in town. We had been playing outside until the rainstorm blew in, and we were now following her around the house. I can remember picking up on cryptic messages from my mom as we happened to all need to be in our small bathroom at the same time for some odd reason. There was no panic, no shoving, no alarm. We just shuffled in and shuffled out. We began loading the car to take my cousins home, and as we loaded the food for the next day, our neighbors across the street ran over to tell us that twin tornadoes had just roared by, hitting the downtown area. Of course, what do? We loaded up and headed downtown to see. After a detour because of downed trees and power lines, we were able to get within a few houses of my aunt and uncle's house. Mom said for us to stay in the car and she would go check it out. Well, we made it to their yard in record time to find them, along with neighbors, standing in their front yard with shocked faces as we all overlooked our beloved church, First Baptist of Water Valley, nearly destroyed completely from the tornadoes. Just beyond our church was Jones Supermarket and Western Auto. Those had both been leveled. 7 people died that day, 40 years ago, April 21st. Many more were injured and lived to tell the story. Now, if you are new to Huntsville, you probably don't know why we get nervous when a tornado warning is issued. Several of my coworkers remembered the 1974 tornadoes that struck Huntsville on April 3rd. The Huntsville-Madison County Library has a display to remember those who were lost and honor those who were affected by the storm. The storm started in the late afternoon and lasted all night, and that night is referred to as the darkest night in North Alabama history. It was the second largest tornado outbreak for a single 24-hour period. It was the most violent tornado outbreak on record. What about the tornadoes of 2011? Do you remember that day? I cannot tell you about that day because I was away on a business trip with my husband, but my mother and boys can tell you about that day. So many tornadoes over 3 days roared across the southeast, killing hundreds and causing millions of dollars in damage. I can tell you about the needs and the hurts of those around us afterwards, and how churches and communities came together to serve one another. And I can tell you that because memories are still so fresh that we get nervous. In a moment, we will be back to share a special story from 80 years ago, as well as what we can do to help us remember God in our storms and what we can do when we can't.
Surrounding me, let it break at your name. Still, call the sea to still, the rage in me to still, every wave at your name. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, lungs to sing once again. I will praise Jesus, Jesus. You make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. Your silence fair. Jesus, Jesus. You make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. Jesus, 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 Jesus. 'Cause your name is a light that the shadows can't deny. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name is alive, forever lifted high. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name is a light that the shadows can't deny. Your name cannot be overcome.
Memories of storms stick with us, don't they?
There's a lot of storms out there in the ocean that you don't realize.
A few weeks ago, I had the privilege of getting to sit down with Mr. Pat Patterson, a World War II veteran. Mr. Patterson is 98 years young and recalls one of the biggest storms of his life. He was about 18 years old, right after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, and he was stationed on the USS Amsterdam in the Pacific Ocean. The Amsterdam was a light cruiser with 2 seaplanes. It was fast and formidable. The Amsterdam and its men earned a battle star and were at the signing of the armistice. One night, Mr. Pat remembers, there was a storm causing waves taller than the ship. He was so afraid of drowning below deck that he slept in a hammock near the flags. Mr. Pat was a semaphore flagman who sent messages using an alphabet with flags like Morse code. This particular night, the seaplane pilot coming in could not land on the ship that was going up and down in the swells, so he bailed out of the plane into the rough seas. Mr. Pat was sent with an officer into a lifeboat to rescue the pilot who was floating on the surface. So picture these swells so big that you can't see a giant ship.
The swells are so deep. So when they got me up there, they were holding my feet to the ship, to the boat that we were in, and they told me to signal back to the ship that we'd picked up the men.
Mr. Pat remembers finding the pilot, then being instructed to signal back to the ship that the pilot was found. But how? Where was the ship to signal to? Plus, how was he going to stand in the small boat going up and down to a ship he couldn't see? His officer with him instructed him to stand while he held his feet to the bottom of the boat, and the ship could surely see him, even though he couldn't see the ship. That's what he did, and all were rescued.
Got out there, and I couldn't even see the ship that we were on after we got out because of the swells in the ocean. But they held me, 2 people held me down on the deck with their feet while I got up and was told to signal back to the ship that we have found the pilot that jumped out of his plane, and he's okay, and we're breaking back to the ship.
Today I want us to think about storms in our lives, and when in the midst of them we can remember what God has done for us and that He will do it again. But sometimes we can't remember, whether that's because we have forgotten or we don't know that God has been with us at all. That's when we need others who can come alongside us, hold our feet down, or shuffle us to safety. I want you to hear this from Psalm 77, 11 through 20.
I will remember the deeds of the Lord. Yes, I will remember your miracles of long ago. I will consider all your works and meditate on your mighty deeds. Your ways, God, are holy. What God is as great as our God? You are the God who performs miracles. You display your power among the peoples. With your mighty arm you redeemed your people, the descendants of Jacob and Joseph. The waters saw you, God. The waters saw you and writhed. The very depths were convulsed. The clouds poured down water. The heavens resounded with thunder. Your arrows flashed back and forth. Your thunder was heard in the whirlwind. Your lightning lit up the world. The earth trembled and quaked. Your path led through the sea, your way through the mighty waters, though your footprints were not seen. You led your people like a flock by the hand of Moses and Aaron.
What I love about this psalm is that it was written as a group lament. When we go through storms of our darkest night, as they call the tornadoes of 1974, we shouldn't go through it alone. So what kind of storms am I talking about? How about parenthood? I promise you, I think I lost some years when my boys were toddlers. There was a popular parenting guide at the time that talked about not parenting outside of the tornado, meaning not allowing my son's behavior to go beyond boundaries that I had set, or it would be harder the next time it happened. I'm not sure we were all that successful, but I can tell you my house looked like a tornado had come through at times. Thank goodness I had a mom's group that got together once or twice a month so I could bounce ideas off of, enjoy some adult conversations. and realize I was not alone during that stressful time. Through each stage of parenthood, God has surrounded me with these same friends and new ones to go through life with, who pray with me and for me during hard times and celebrate with me during good times. But what about infertility? 1 Samuel 1 tells us that Hannah was deeply distressed, begging the Lord to remember her and give her a son. She had a darkest night, and later remembered that the Lord had answered her prayer of a son. And she remembered her promise to God to give her son back to serve in the temple. One of my favorite writers and speakers is Annie F. Downs. She writes with vulnerability and humor. In her book, Remember God, she writes about her disappointment in God not answering her prayer for a family, and comes to her darkest night asking, "Is God kind?" What she realized is this. She writes, "I do know the answer. I know God is always kind. I know He provides. I know God does not disappoint. But why do I forget what I know? Because life isn't kind. And my life doesn't look like the way I thought it would. And provision has a lot of faces. And sometimes I'm really disappointed." And we are, aren't we? She said, "I know God provides. I know." But how does she know? In order to remember, we have to do three things: recognize, repeat, and recall. First, in order to remember in a storm, we need to recognize that the provision is from God. Oftentimes, God's provision doesn't look like how we think it should. In March, we learned that lesson when we were on a mission trip to Alaska and the plumbing froze at the street. God's provision came as buckets we could use until we could either move to a new location or thaw the lines. We grumbled and complained and were all in a tizzy. But when we realized God was providing for us, we were warm and safe and had buckets. We could then focus on other things like the reason for being there. It wasn't ideal, but it was a temporary provision He provided. In order to remember in a storm, we also need to repeat it. And what I mean by that is when we journal or write down what God has done or simply tell others about it, we have a better chance of remembering the next time we are in a storm, and others can learn from us. My list of promises is my way of remembering when I go through storms. The third thing we need to do to remember God in a storm is to recall His goodness during the next storm. To do that, we have to stop or pause and make an effort to recall. I think it interesting that in the eye of a storm like a hurricane, the wind is more calm. Maybe that is the pause needed to remember what God has brought you through. In the eye of a storm, you have to remember His promise of peace. What if you aren't able to recognize, repeat, or recall during a storm? Then that's when you surround yourself with people who can do that with you. Have you ever wondered where memory like an elephant came from? I think it's because a group of elephants is called a memory. Not only is it a collective term like army of caterpillars, pandemonium of parrots, or wisdom of wombats, but elephants have one of the best memories of all animals. They know every member of their memory and can remember each other even when separated for decades. When there's a hurt or grieving elephant, its memory group will often surround them, providing aid and support during their time of need. What if you had a memory group that helps you remember that God is kind and He loves you and has provided for you in the past and will do that again? What if there was someone who could hold your feet to the bottom of a boat so you couldn't fall? Look around you for people who can remind you of what God has done for you or can do in your life. On the morning I came to visit Mr. Pat, his caregiver Darla reminded us of what he woke up singing that morning. Love lifted me. He had no idea we would be talking about storms that morning, and I can't think of a worse storm than a world war. 80 years later, he was singing these words. I was sinking deep in sin, far from the peaceful shore, very deeply stained within, sinking to rise no more. But the Master of the sea heard my despairing cry, from the waters lifted me, now safe am I. Love lifted me, when nothing else could help, love lifted me. Souls in danger, look above, Jesus completely saves. He will lift you by His love out of the angry waves. He's the master of the sea, billows His will obey. He, your Savior, wants to be. Be saved today. So in the storms of life, the loss of a loved one, the trouble with a coworker, or loss of a job, parenting issues, marital issues, threat of wars, politics, so on and so on, we remember that God is kind. He doesn't promise there won't be storms, but He does promise to be with you through them and draws you close to Him.
Love lifted me, love lifted me, when nothing else would do. Love lifted me, love lifted me, oh yes, love lifted me, when nothing else would do. Love lifted me.
Stir the stagnant waters of my soul. Merge me with your river, which brings life. I don't have all the right words to say that will provoke you to love me anymore than you already do. Won't you come like you promised? Pour out your spirit, pour out your spirit. Won't you come like you promised? Pour out your spirit, pour out your spirit, and overcome the darkness with your light. your spirit, pour out your spirit.
Hi everyone, I'm Holly Knupp, minister to Median Adults at First Baptist Huntsville. We are folks in our 40s and 50s, married, single, and empty nesters. We'd like to invite you to any of our in-person studies, small groups, or social events. Check out our website or email me at holly@fbchsv.org for more information. We look forward to building community and growing our faith together with you. Not only is it a collective term like army of caterpillars, pandemonium of parrots, or wisdom of wombats, but elephants. You can't do that.
Do we need to make him?
That was so good.
Yeah, you can't.
Oh my. I'm
Sorry.
Gonna use that. Let's cut that. I'm going to use that later. I'm sorry.
Quiet on this
I need to. Oh my. That was so good. All right, my bad.
Where do you want me to start? Sorry.